My name is Peter, recovered alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And very grateful to be here. Steve, thanks for inviting us back. Steve called me up about a month ago. He says, I'm really desperate. Please help me out. I need to lean on you again. So I reluctantly agreed to help Steve out. So it's great to see so many faces. I know a lot of you guys from Zoom, and we see each other here and there. So it's great to be here. Two buds are here, Patty and Chris Raymer. They both celebrated birthdays this week. I'm excited about hearing Chris and get to do this with my buddy Jimmy. I mean, we've done a few of these together and we're still friends. It's unbelievable. And get to see where God takes us. June 23rd, 1988 is when a loving God separated me from alcohol. I'm very grateful for this gift of sobriety. My separation from alcohol was like two guys fighting in a bar who had to be pulled apart. I could not stay away from a drink, no matter how much I tried, no matter what was at stake. And God surrendered me on June 23rd, 1988. I do have a sponsor, Bob Azana, out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and my home group is in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. We'll call No Problems, Just Solutions on a Wednesday night big book study, and I just love being part of my home group. It's a 7:30 meeting, and the coolest thing is that we're there at 6 o'clock having coffee. And when the meeting ends, we're there about 45 minutes, an hour after the meeting, and it's what I call the soul music before the meeting starts. It's all of us talking. Cindy was speaking last night. We were in this room about an hour earlier, and you could just feel the vibe. And I really love that about my home group more than the speakers. Quite frankly, I just love watching and listening to what's going on alive and sober. I'm currently sponsoring 10 guys, and life has me busy. My wife sponsors half of South Florida, so together we have a very busy home life, and God keeps us in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. My assignment this afternoon is to split step 10 with Jimmy, and I'll see where God takes us. I think it's important, though, just to let you know I belong here based on what happened to me. As I said a moment ago, in June of 88, June 23rd of 1988, my separation from alcohol happens, and it wasn't a day I planned on. It was the last thing I was thinking. In fact, when it came down to the moment, there's a moment that happens. I've heard enough of your stories, I had a few birthdays in AA. There's a moment, there's an event, there's something that happens that flips us. Where God at that point shuts down the ears to the mind and open up the ears to the soul. And we're hearing a voice that has been talking to us, but we hear it for the first time. And so for me, my separation was in an abandoned building in Lower Manhattan. I was homeless, living in the back of a hallway. And then something happened. The very same God I despised and loathed was the same God I begged for mercy. And that was a long way from my first drink, which happened at 14 years old. I grew up in a place called Brooklyn, New York. You can tell I'm not from Oklahoma by the way I speak. I mean, in my family, you know, when we say I love you, it sounds like a threat. I mean, it's just interesting. But, I love you. But at 14 years old, picking up a drink, and it was quite frankly blissful. It was euphoric. By the time I finished a quart of beer, I loved the effect produced by alcohol. It erased the memories of my mom's suicide. It erased the thought of my dad, who I was terribly afraid of. It removed the years of being molested as a little boy. It put me very present to the moment. I felt part of life at last. And it filled this void up that I never saw coming. I felt bigger and stronger. I felt put back together again. Now, a lot of civilians, young kids go through adolescent, pressure. That's just part of life. I think we kind of take it to another level. And we sometimes don't talk enough about trauma. I mean, there was things that happened to me, I'm sure many in this room, that is not an excuse to be an alcoholic, but it's trauma, whether it's sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, watching parents beat the hell out of each other. That's a template how I'm going to operate going out of there. So by the time I'm 18 or 19, I'm operating out of a very broken, wounded place. And only now the power of alcohol is going to shut that down a little bit. But I don't know anything about this phenomenon called craving. I would get stuck in more. I need more alcohol. I need more. I need more of something because there's nothing here. And this obsession, this spiritual malady, I never heard words like this. And what alcoholism does, and the progression gets bigger and louder and starts to take people with us. And I'm experiencing broken relationships. I'm experiencing getting fired from jobs. My music career, which if I had one regret in my life that I go to sleep with for the final time, it's about not pursuing music. It took that away from me. It just took everything away from me. And even though I would curse the bottle of whiskey, I'd have to drink. It's a very scary place we get to. Again, I've heard enough stories over the years. Very frightening place we get to where the very same thing that works stops working, but we got to hit it anyway. I know the alcohol is not going to take me to that place, or all the pills I eat are not going to take me to that place, but I need it now to stop from doing this and stop from getting sick and having a 911 call on me. And I would sacrifice anything, go to any lengths. Today it's so important to talk to you about what I believe in, because if I stop talking about it, I'll stop believing in it. And I can't apologize for the message that has been given to me. I can't apologize for this loving God which gives me mercy every day. Mercy and pardon every day. Because based on my track record, if I had a God that was just, I'd be in a lot of trouble. But I have a merciful God, one who gives pardon and allows me to chop wood and carry water day at a time. So after 7 treatment centers, and I got into non-conference approved dry goods along the way too, left marks all over my body for that, hepatitis C, a whole bunch of things. And even when I walked away from the outside issues, I'm glued to a bottle of whiskey and pills. And every time I would say, well, this is it. Just one more time, and it's got to stop. There comes a point in our journey, for me anyway, where I knew it was wreckage. Wherever I went, it was wreckage. No one wanted anything to do with me. When my dad threw me out, my grandparents threw me out, my brothers said, just stay away from us. It's a wake-up call. It's an aha moment that, is it possible it's me who's the problem? There was no room to point fingers anymore. When I show up to Alcoholics Anonymous by way of being homeless in 1988, about to go into my 7th treatment center, and then they sober me up. And I walk into the meetings called Alcoholics Anonymous, the sacred fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm making a lot of meetings. I'm doing the 2 and 3 a days because you have nowhere else to go. So you get another meeting, have another cup of coffee and a donut, and go to another meeting, and it was like that. Trust me, because my meeting attendance was really good, I was still not better. I was not okay. I was the same 14-year-old kid hanging out on a street corner who was tore up from the floor up inside, showed up to the meetings called Alcoholics Anonymous. And almost 6 months to the day, almost got drunk again. It was only God's grace that kept me away from a drink, because I wanted to drink. It was that bottom we could hit in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll never forget, I was living in Minnesota. It was December 22nd, 1988. Christmas is around the corner. New Year's is after that. People are shopping. My family's home. And I am ripped apart by alcoholism. I don't ever have to put a drink in me to die from alcoholism. I can suffer from full-blown alcoholism while I'm sober making meetings. My alcoholism was going underground and resurfaced in other areas. Every spree you can think of. And what nailed me was this food disorder I picked up along the way that followed me right into about 1.5 years, almost 2 years of sobriety. I had to go to another fellowship for that. It was my way to get control, to get some comfort, to get relief from the world out there because it's problematic. I have no design for living, and I'm making meetings called Alcoholics Anonymous. So once God gave me the gift, the G-O-D, the gift of desperation. It happened to me, and my separation happened to me in AA when the ego screams a little louder, the desperation screams a little louder than the ego. And the ego gets crushed for a moment. There's an opportunity here for a shift. And I have nothing to do with that. I didn't get me sober. I didn't quit drinking. I didn't stop drinking. I did that for years to return right back to the thing which was killing me. The freedom I seek today is no longer for me. I still think I need more freedom. I need more stuff. I need more to arrange things out there. I need to acquire more things. I need to get everything, all my ducks in a row. That's seeking freedom for me. I seek freedom from me today. I would hear people sometimes tell me, blessed art, you need a bigger God. No, I don't. I need a smaller me. Because less me, more God, less me. And so I land in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm looking for a sponsor because you told me to get a sponsor. I don't know what this guy's supposed to do for me. You need a coach. You need a manager. I don't want a coach or a manager. I just don't want to drink anymore, but a drink would be nice. And I'm doing this tug of war, and I can't breathe anymore. Jimmy always says, how long can you going to hold your breath? I'm holding my breath. I'm turning blue. There's got to be something here. What attracted me so much to you was not only you told the story that I can identify when it came to alcohol and all your brokenness, but you guys look shiny and glossy. I was in Minnesota. I would attend this meeting called the Three Legacies meeting. I was brought there. It was about this size crowd on a Friday night, and everyone was suited up. Everyone looked great. They talked and they smiled. It was the music before the meeting started. And I'm pinned up against the back of the wall wearing my kid brother's clothes that did not fit. It's like 1 billion below zero out, and I got like a zip up. Remember those members only jackets we used to wear? Kill me now. And I'm freezing. And I'm trying to front like I got it together. And the old timer said, you must be new, come with me. And I'm dying 1,000 deaths. But I would hear you and I would watch you. I still observe people. It's just something God gave me. I watch a lot. I say, how do they have jobs? How do they have relationships? How do they look so clean? How do they look so shiny? I feel dirty. I just got out of a shower, but I feel dirty. How could I live now knowing how I lived then? All the things I did, if you will, my misdeeds put me in a position where life was still painful. I'm not free. How do I get on your team? I'm tired of feeling dirty. I'm tired of feeling like a mistake. I'm tired of walking around with thoughts that I should just die while I'm sober. I can't do this. And it was about a year later, I was brought home. My dad invited me back home, and I was brought to my first meeting in Brooklyn, New York. It was my first home group called the Free Spirit Group. Interesting crowd there in Brooklyn, New York. We had Joey Bag of Donuts. Frankie had a lettuce. No one had a last name. The only requirement for membership was a pinky ring, sunglasses, and gold jewelry. We thought The Godfather was an educational movie. This was my first home group. Now, they had some great guys there who did great 12-step work. I found a teacher, a sponsor who was in this book. Now, I'm going to tell you something. What happened to me, I still love mechanics. I fell in love with the treasure map more than the treasure. I became a mechanic. And I don't have regrets about it. But if you misquoted a book, you were going to hear from me. And I got married to mechanics. And when I found out the truth is true until we discover a new truth, and I had to start living from the soul, and I bottomed out with that. Because I can worship the things that take me to God, or to God the things that are taking me to. And after a while, I start to see the flaw in that. This whole thing for me is about taking me to a place where I'm at one with my God so I can practice these principles in all my affairs. I start to look at, I didn't write a fourth step. Some power kept me sober while I was doing a fourth step. And so as I clean up the wreckage of my past, step 10, which was exercise in intellect at some point, became a work of the soul. You know, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. There's a lot to that. So I would hear step 10, I can comment on step 10, but until I start to live in 10 and 11 and practice these principles in all my affairs and enter what we talk about, the world of the Spirit, it were words. It really had no depth and weight for me, let alone for you. And so when I looked at step 10, some of us in AA don't write out a 10 steps, some of us do. I stay away from that bait. I used to be right in the middle of that debate, no more. It's really not worth it. I can only share with you what has worked for me then and works for me now. Is that being accountable to someone on how my day is going, the spot check inventory. And there's some instructions I'm supposed to follow in step 10. And one of the things it tells me, which I do with all my affairs, is I turn to God first. It says we turn to God at once, which means not when I'm comfortable, not tonight. Not when the time is right. It means something happens. I need to turn in order to go out. I need to turn in order to go out. If I don't turn in, I'll go without. So the first place of reference is right back to my God. What do I do about this? I'm hooked. I have a resentment. It's 8:30 in the morning. I have a fear. It's driving me already. And I know behind the resentment's a fear anyway. I'm afraid of not getting what I want, losing what I have. It's unbelievable how I can lead with paranoia. I can live in the wreckage of the future and nothing is happening. I know this is going to happen. And depending on how spiritually fit I am, it's going to determine what I do with these thoughts. Because when I look at step 10, it's really about what my thoughts are producing at the moment. I don't know about you, but it happens to me. I'm usually up at 5 a.m. Open up my eyes, it's 2 minutes after 5, and I'm already in a heated argument with somebody who died 10 years ago. And I look to the future. I know how the day's going to play out, and by 10 after 5, I go from Moses to Rambo. Then my feet hit the floor. I go over to my little prayer spot that we have in our house. I drop to my knees. I do prayer and meditation. I do some reading, and I'm Moses again. And somewhere between getting dressed and getting to my car, I'm Rambo again. Until I walk into a home group, and how you doing? I'm oming. Everything's absolutely lovely. I'm spiritual. So what step 10 allows me to do is eliminate that kind of stuff. The process of getting sober is really removal. I don't need anything else. It's constantly stripping away what I accumulate during a day. What I accumulate, I can on Monday I can still be walking around with Sunday all over me because it hasn't been addressed, it hasn't been discussed, and no amends has been made. I didn't discuss it with anyone. I'm not looking to be helpful with anyone. What happens is, once I start getting involved in me, I start getting involved in my stuff and my resentments, that becomes paramount. It becomes more important than my relationship with God with you or even my sobriety. I'm consumed with me. And we know those folks. You sit down with a cup of coffee, they don't stop talking about themselves. They're always in a jam. There's always something going on. It would be like those big swinging doors back there. If I put a sheet of loose leaf in between those doors are going to open and close. They're going to be unaffected. If I put 5 sheets or 10 sheets, it's going to start to get jammed. If I put more than that, that door gets stuck. It's jammed, and that's what happens to me. I can justify and minimize and rationalize the fear or the resentment. It's no big deal, and it starts to get plaque on the soul, and I'm drifting away from you. The thing about 10 and 11, it keeps me very accountable with step 1. How am I doing in step 1? Have I drifted away from step 1 based on my prayer, my meeting attendance, my inventory? What does 10 and 11 look like? Who am I praying to? Who is my God? Something happened to me in meditation not too long ago. This is what I'm sober, thank you God, over 37 years now. And if you ask me, I'd say I trust and rely upon God at all times. And what came to me in meditation, in my relationship with God, I get from my God, when are you going to stop doubting me? I could feel my chest get hit like with the fist of Gulliver. I thought I was. And then I had to examine how many times do I have adversity happen and I rely upon me to overcome that. How many times do I have skepticism or doubt about this power? There's something in Scripture that says I should be walking by faith, not by sight anymore. And sometimes I get it backwards. And what step 10 allows me to do is put me right back in the saddle again by taking my own inventory. It's a 4 through 9 every day. Now, if I was the mayor of Alcoholics Anonymous, president, we read how it works all the time. At almost every home group, you read how it works. And after a while, for some of us, we don't even hear it anymore. We're looking at a phone, which, pouring how it works. Yeah, I know. Rarely have we seen a person. I got it. I've heard this a million times. And I always thought of a newcomer, like really new, raw, sitting in a meeting, and it's an 8 o'clock meeting. They know it ends at 9, and they're afraid they're going to get drunk by 9:30. They're holding on for dear life. And we're talking about 90 days and 6 months and 10 years. And, dude, I can't make it till midnight. How long is this going to last? And then I sit down, because I've done this with a brand new guy, and says, come with me, I'm going to read you something. This is what's about to happen to you if you let us do what we need to do. It says we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. Wholeness of mind, one with God. I can't get drunk on truth. I will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, I recoil from it as from a hot flame. I react sanely and normally. And I find this attitude has been given to me without any thought or effort on my part. And I sit with this guy and say, you don't have to do anything. It's all the fall through 9 work that's going to bring me here. I think it's in the 3rd step. It says we become conscious of God's presence. I'm awake to God. His presence in my life that I can lean all the way into. It just comes, this is the miracle of it. I'm not fighting it, neither am I avoiding temptation. I feel as though I've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I haven't even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Now, the truth about the problem is not going to get removed, but the problem, it's not part of my life anymore. And I watch the new guy's eyes light up. You mean I don't have to sit with this anymore? No. I don't have to think it through, play the tape to the end, keep it green. This is God's mercy working in my life once I'm awake spiritually. This is a place called recovered from a singularly hopeless state of mind and body. It does not exist for me. What a great place to be. So what I do throughout the day, I'm a writer. That's what I do. I write the inventory. Now, if I'm working, I can't write. If I'm attending to something, I can't do that. But when I have an opportunity after prayer, I'll put pen to paper. There's some folks I share my inventories with. It says we discuss with someone immediately. I have some immediately folks. Hey, can you hear an inventory? I'm stuck on this. And it says, where was I selfish, dishonest, or afraid? There's no 3rd column here. They really streamline it for me. Just so I can get to see me operate. If anyone's written inventory, you know as you're writing inventory going, I can't believe I'm angry about this. What I've learned is I'm in the effort business, not the outcome business. I'll share a quick story with you. A number of years ago, my wife and I have worked together since she arrived in Florida. And it's the best. I work with my best friend all day long. And one day I walked into the office around 3 o'clock. I'd stop in her office, have a cup of coffee. And my lunch was coffee and chew on a cigar. She said, you eat? Yeah, I have coffee and a cigar. This is lunch. And I walked into the office and she was crying. I'll never forget this. And I said, what's wrong? She says, nothing. I said, you need to tell me. And she told me we had a boss who was chauvinistic. I mean, he looked at women as, second class. And he would bark at women like he would bark at a man. And he barked at her. And she was just beside herself and she was weeping. And she told me exactly what happened. And in an instant, I turned into Rocky V. And I know what's going on in the head. I might go to jail in about an hour. I'm definitely getting fired, but I'm going to settle this. So I loaded up the guns, if you will, and I'm walking out, and I get into my car, and I turn the car over, and I'm ready to roll. Now, God has a way of ruining my plans and designs all the time. Because the little voice said, what are you doing? You should call your sponsor. I don't want to call my sponsor, and God, leave me alone. And so I call my sponsor. And when you're so resentful and so angry, you're kind of vibrating and it's just spewing out of you. And my sponsor was this guy, Mickey Mustard out of Denver. And he's, what's going on? Slow down. I says, let's do this. He's, Peter, let's pray. Let's do an inventory. Let's do a 10-step. I didn't have a pen and paper. And if I did have a pen and paper, there was no way I was writing at this point. I'm vibrating. He's, let's walk through this. Do a 10-step. He's, first, let's pray. He prayed with me over the phone. He's, now, who's the resentment with? And I started going fast. He slowed down. What's the cause? And he walked me through an inventory. And he said to me something that sponsors would do. Is your place beating up your boss? Is your place in the office comforting Marion? I hate when the sponsor is right. So I walked back in. I sat with Marion, and we talked and we flushed it out. She kind of got put back together again. And it was about not too much later, we were working for a different employer. But I did that with head up and shoulder square with grace and dignity, like my book tells me. Now, there was no amends to be made there. But I had to quickly discuss this with someone because left up to my own devices, I may have gotten in trouble. And I'm not even a tough guy. I don't know what I was going to do, but it sounded good in the head. I'm not in the results business. There's a story of a man who's laying on a couch all day long, day after day after day, yeah? And one day he wakes up and the Lord appears in front of him and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I've been watching you. He says, I have a task for you to do." He says, "Tomorrow morning I'm going to put a boulder in front of your door. I want you to push the boulder. Can you do that for me?" He says, "Anything, Lord." Next morning he wakes up, puts on his sneakers, opens up, there's a huge boulder. He starts pushing from sun up to sundown. Next morning does the same thing. He does this for 90 days. Pushing and pushing and pushing. 91st day, Satan wakes him up and says, "What are you doing?" You notice God and Satan sound like they're from New York, by the way. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, the Lord told me to push this boulder." He's pushed the boulder. You've been pushing it for 90 days. It hasn't moved an inch. The God played another trick on you. He says, "You're right. I'm going back on the couch." Next day, the Lord shows up and says, "I thought I told you to push the boulder." He says, "God, I've been pushing it for 90 days. It hasn't moved an inch." And God says, "I told you to push the boulder. I didn't tell you to move the boulder. That's my job. I'm not in the results business." So I write inventory. After prayer, what I like to do is, instead of just writing, is purge it on paper after prayer, and I'll write down who am I resentful with and why I'm resentful. Was I selfish, dishonest, or frightened? Do I owe an amends? I take something out of the 11th step too. It says, am I holding sins of omission? Where am I not willing to discuss this with someone else? That's usually a sponsor, usually somebody in my support group. I need to talk to you about something. And then what I've been moved to do at this point, whoever I'm resentful at, I need to pray for forgiveness and acceptance. And not forgive them if they do what I want, but just forgive them for who and what they are. And I'm going to tell you why. Where I am right now, sometimes it's hard work for me. Sometimes it's heavy lifting because some people do things that you're like, I'm like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. My head does a 360. But I cannot afford, where I am in my life, I've been this way for a few years, to harbor grudges and resentments and plaque on the soul towards someone. When Joe or Mary walks in the room and I have tension, I have had tension. I'm the one suffering. And how could I possibly claim to you that I'm walking a spiritual path if I'm hating my brother or sister or having tension towards them? If spirituality doesn't touch every single area of my life, it touches none of my life. I got a job to do. I need to participate in this. So I write inventory and I pray for acceptance and forgiveness. And sometimes it takes a long time to do this. There was one gentleman, it took years. And he approached me at a conference and made his version of amends to me. That thing's been put back to bed. So I don't have tension or animosity when they walk in the door. How free do I want to be? I go to an ocean with a thimble. I come home with a thimble full of water, and God's given me the whole thing. How free do I want to be? Being attached to what people think of me is bondage. Being attached to what people say about me is bondage. Because if I'm going to listen to the accolades, I have to listen to the demerits. It is what it is. And so for most days, because my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey, I need to take care of the soul. And most days I get to travel light. Because if you're like me, my alcoholism will pay any price tomorrow to seek comfort today. No matter what that is. And that calls sex sprees and food sprees and gambling sprees and you name it. Because I don't have anything to get me through today. So what I do, I started my day with prayer and meditation. And when I'm agitated or doubtful, which means I'm probably getting resentful or fearful, I turn in order to go out, and sometimes I'll write an inventory and discuss it with someone immediately all the time. I'm pretty disciplined with that. I found being disciplined to the spiritual life gives me a whole lot of freedom out there. The more disciplined I am, the more freedom I get to experience. Because of inventory, the 4 through 9 work, I've gotten back to my church through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Really, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then 8 and 9 brought me back to my church, where I'm an active member in my church. And I realized how dark it is before the dawn that I was in AA and not attending those services on a Sunday when I'm home. And I was still in the shadow. And it has opened up a whole door for me about this new way of living for a number of years now. Where I go to the same God He asked to keep me sober for the day, I'm going to His house once a week and saying thank you to Him. And the two of us go. Experientially, I had a sponsor, Mark H., would tell us experientially, can you talk to a group of folks about what it's like living in the world of the Spirit? What's that feel like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? And I don't know if I'll do a good job at articulating that. How can you when we're speaking about God? But I can show you from my actions that it's a whole lot different than when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I got here, I still had the street all over me. I had alcoholic thinking, I had street thinking. I had alcoholic words, I had street words. I looked the part. But when we have the transformation of spiritual revolution, the conversion, when that happens via 4 through 9, something is different. My point of view on everything is different. I'm hearing differently. I'm seeing different. I'm speaking differently. I'm operating from the soul, and the soul always knows what to do, where to go, and what to say. When the old timers would tell me it's an inward journey, that's where we're going. Not to the mind. It's not an exercise of the mind. It's not self-help for a guy like me. It's about where I am in the soul. How am I doing right now? And if anyone's sitting here loaded with resentments and fear, welcome to the NFL. Welcome home. But we have a way out which we believe works. A design for living. To get out of that. Because I have found the light we experience here is nothing but darkness to the mind. The mind doesn't get it. The mind wants me drunk or dead or suffering in Alcoholics Anonymous. It wants no part of God. It wants no part of this workshop. It wants no part of this book. It ceases to exist. So when God's light shows up, it tries to put roadblocks in the way. But God already wins. God always wins. He already won the war. I need to follow that light. So again, I chop wood and carry water. I think my time is up, but thank you for listening.
All right, buddy, I'm Jimmy, alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober, and it's always been customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group called the Design for Living Group on the Jersey Shore. That's New Jersey for you Tennesseans. Just trying to be helpful. Got a sponsor, same as Peter, Bob Azans from St. Paul, Minnesota. Sponsor a lot of guys, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28, 1987. So, extremely grateful for this way of life, extremely grateful to be here this weekend, and I've been here before many times. I used to help Lee a lot, so it's nice to be back down here in Nashville, Tennessee, and to be with my buddy Peter. Peter was my sponsor for about 15 to 17 years, I don't even know. I had hair when he was sponsoring me, I know that. Matter of fact, he leaned over to me right before right before this meeting started, he said, you know what, you were my best sponsee ever. Thanks, But just to give you a little visual where I come from, I live with my wife Mary Beth in a place called Spring Lake, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, right on the beach. The locals like to call it the Irish Riviera. Members of AA like to call it Cirrhosis by the Sea. Now, if you heard that line before, of course I stole it. We all steal things, right? But a beautiful area, great AA, just like great AA here, and so many people I know here from being down here so many times, and it's so good to see the people and friends and just come together and just enjoy this weekend. So I hope you all enjoy this weekend. So I'm not going to go mechanically, like not that Peter did that, but, I just was thinking of some thoughts as he was speaking, and I always meditate before I do any kind of talk. I'll just take quiet time by myself, or I took it with my wife, and we listened to a nice guided meditation. And in the meditation, the person that was doing the meditation said, how do you put it? There's only two ways to live your life. Live your life today like nothing's a miracle, or live your life today like everything's a miracle. And that came from Albert Einstein, just in case you need to win a trivia test. Well, and as I look around the room, and a lot of you I know, and the stories I've heard through the years, God, how many miracles are in this room right now? We're just two guys that are sitting up here. Last night Cindy was up here. There'd be other people that'd be standing up here. We're just telling a story, right? But the miracle of sobriety, the miracle of the life we've been given, And the question I always have to ask myself is, why do I take this miracle for granted? Why do I just assume that I could stay sober for good and for all for the rest of my life? Right? So there's some things that I think about, especially in this topic of growing in understanding and effectiveness, in step 10, when it comes to step 10, how many of us will walk into a meeting this week, or we'll hear it read from the podium over the course of the weekend? We'll go through the steps. We get to the 10th step, continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admitted it. Right? And when I go into a church basement, I read that off the shade and off the wall. It sounds like okay, if I'm moving along, I screw up a little bit. Maybe call somebody, maybe write inventory. Maybe make amends if I made a mistake. Click my heels, and all is good. Right? Nothing further from the truth, especially when you read out literature. It tells me that I've entered the world of the Spirit, that I've had a spiritual experience as the result of the first 9 steps. Right? And that there's a certain language, and Peter just ended with that, there's a certain language, there's a certain behavior, there's a certain thing that goes on when you live in the world of the Spirit. And what that is really the promises. Now, we got a lot of inventories in this book. Of course, we have the 4th step, the 10th step, spot check inventory, evening review. But as we know, we could take every line that's in this book, flip it into a consideration, and ask ourselves, where do we stand right now with this? So here's an opportunity to pull your spiritual mirror out and put it to your face and just ask yourself some questions. Let's take the 12 promises after the 9th step before we enter into the 10th step. I will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows, still seeking to slip away. So let me ask you a question. Has it? We will comprehend the word serenity, we will know peace. Do I? A whole attitude, a whole outlook upon life will change. Has it? Now, I'm not asking this to the person who might be counting days in here right now. I'm talking about the person who might have fell asleep in their sobriety. Because we all go through that period where we're dead asleep thinking we're wide awake. And we're just going through the motions. And I don't want to say, I'll say I go through the motions. And I take for granted the life I've been given. And I'm not going to any many lengths that we talk about in order to stay in the sunlight of the Spirit. So I could take all those promises and I could really flip them into an inventory and ask myself, where do I stand with this? And if I'm not experiencing these promises or any of the millions of other promises that are in the literature, why not? Why not? So my sponsor, he would ask questions like this. Well, Jimmy, maybe you need to write another inventory. Maybe you're trying to hang your hat on something that you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. He says it all the time. Did the meal that you ate last week keep you full today? No. So there's always constant inventory, right? So maybe is it possible, in order to grow in understanding and effectiveness, I need to go through the work again, no matter how much time I've been away from doing that work, that consistent work, right? Maybe, just maybe, is it possible that I need to finish those amends that I've been blowing off, or be too fearful to go and knock on doors and pay their money back? Maybe, is it possible, in order to grow in understanding and effectiveness, I got to stop procrastinating on the inventory that I am writing? The one where your sponsor has his foot up your rear end all the time? When you're going to get done, when you're going to get done, when you're going to get done. Or maybe is it just possible, in order to grow in understanding and effectiveness, I got to share that secret that I'm sitting on right now in my back pocket, under the delusion that I think I could walk through the archway a free man with a secret in my back pocket. So these were just questions that my sponsor asked me, because why are we not living in the sunlight spirit? If that's the goal here, because I learned that a long time ago, that we have 2 goals in Alcoholics Anonymous. The first goal is the obvious one: don't pick up the first drink. But the second one is, I think, what we all want to attain in here, and that is to step into that sunlight of the Spirit, that place of freedom, that place of where the problem is solved, that place where we're placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, that place that Bill Wilson likes to call the perfect place, utopia. That place where we can experience God with no experience God. Well, we're all human beings on a spiritual walk. We're going to lose focus of the walk. And our humanness is going to get us, and we're going to walk back into the darkness of our lives. Right? Hence, we got 10, we got 11, we got these 3 disciplines on the back end of these 12 steps in order to get us back into the light. So the only question I always have to ask myself, am I doing this stuff? I would call him up when he was my sponsor. I call him up all the time anyway. I call him up, and this is what's going on. In the early days when he was a tough guy, he used to say to me, write it out, click, He doesn't do that anymore. He's softened a little bit. Thank you, Marion. We all had that edge at one time, right? That militant look. So I'm a guy that, I always like to say I was a guy that was born perfect, and I was quickly handed over to these 2 character defects called mom and dad. And, I make a joke out of that, but the truth of the matter is, it has to be someone's fault for the way I feel inside. Right? And obviously my parents were the first ones to put that blame on, and all that my parents ever tried to do was to give me morals, values, good education. And all I did ever for my parents is take all the goodness that was ever given to me, rolled it into a nice ball, and I stuffed it down my parents' throat, and I introduced them to a way of life that they never even knew existed. And I'm kind of like part of Peter's family. I'm the Hungarian version of the Italian family. We had the same dad. We had, it's like the same neighborhood. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. I grew up at a time, I'm 67. I grew up with, all the dads worked, all the moms stayed home. The only requirement for membership in the neighborhood was 5 or more kids. There was always something going on. There was always a party. There was always a graduation. There was always something going on. And at every event was king alcohol. And again, this term that we've learned or we've heard for many years, this disease of perception, the way I would look at booze is, I equate alcohol to fun. I equate alcohol to some sort of freedom. I equate alcohol to problem solved. I would watch you guys drink, and it just seemed like there was an ease and comfort that came once you started to drink. Now, were there fistfights where I grew? All the time, but, that was easily pushed to the side. Because what I would witness is some sort of freedom. And I'm growing up in a house with this guy called Dad, who's cunning, baffling, and powerful. My old man's a tough guy. He's a butcher. Always has blood on him. Not sure if he slaughtered a cow that day or grabbed a guy at a red light. That was that type of guy. He was an off the handle type of guy. He was a tough guy. He just, great provider, but he was just a guy I didn't understand. I loved my father, and I didn't understand my father. I'm one of those guys you would hear a lot of times when we do workshops like this. I got daddy issues. Mommy issue, I got issues, I can't get along with my old man. He doesn't understand my way of life. He doesn't understand why I'm getting locked up, because not only is my drinking progressive, so is my behaviors. But when I was growing up at 5 o'clock every night, I would witness a miracle. And that miracle is my old man would take that first drink. And all of a sudden he became a different guy. He became a guy that wanted to have a catch in the backyard. He became a guy that wanted to tell us about his day. He became a guy that even told a joke once in a while. But there were those days when my old man would come in and take that first drink, and kitchen plates would be flying, kitchen chairs would be flying. If he grabbed one of us young kids, we'd be flying. So a lot of nights in my house at 5:01, 5:02, my 2 brothers and my 2 sisters, we'd be under the covers waiting for the tornado to roar through the house. And when everything was done, we walk out into the kitchen, we walk out into the living room, and, hey, Mom, ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing. None of that makes me alcoholic. But I'm a kid that grows up with a tremendous amount of fear. Fear of loud noises, fear of violence, fear of big guys, fear, the evil and corroding thread. I'm a guy that grows up with a lot of insecurity, inadequacies about myself. It wasn't like I ever had a fireside chat with my old man and was nurtured or anything like that. Everything I learned was on the streets. But worst of all, I'm a guy that grows up with, a lot of secrets, because I'm that guy that just internalizes everything. And then I landed in AA. 13 years old, taking my first drink. Little do I know, for the next 16 years of my life, I just stepped on a path that goes straight to pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And after 16 years, I'm living on the streets for 2 years, close to 2 years, homeless on the streets of northern New Jersey and lower Manhattan. That seems to be the theme this weekend with Cindy, me. You don't have to be homeless to be here, but, it's just part of the game for some of us. And the trauma of that. I needed a lot of outside help when I came here with that stuff. That almost killed me. I'm not going to here to tell you my whole story, but just to let you know how I got here, it's just, I'm living on the streets for about 2 years, and I walked in a bar one day, and a guy said to me, "Hey, Jimmy," a guy I knew from the neighborhood said, "Hey, Jimmy, they're hiring guys like you in Newark Airport." Finally, being seen for my potential. Never flew an airplane before, but it should be interesting. But there was an old airline called People's Express, and they used to hire guys like us. And the job was to take the luggage that was over there and put it on the plane that's over there. I always like to segue here and say, if you flew through Newark Airport in the 80s and you're still waiting for your luggage, I'll make amends after this. But they would hire guys like us. And I won't go into the whole story, but that next day I went to Newark Airport with 2 other guys. We robbed a car. I say borrow, the cop said rob, but we got this car. All 3 of us are now sober over 38 years. All 3 of us made amends to that guy. But I'll never forget coming out of this little interview. It was like, can you lift a suitcase? Yeah, you're hired, And I remember sitting in a room like this gentleman right in front of me, sitting out in Newark Airport. You could just imagine, just people everywhere. And I'm sitting in a chair like that. I couldn't even tell you on my best day how I felt in that moment. I was 29 years old, dying of this thing called alcoholism, and I have no clue that drinking's a problem. It wasn't until I landed in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and, when I opened up this book to page 8, and Bill tells his first step experience, words that I think he puts to all our first step experience, it rang true in my life. No words could tell the loneliness and despair. I felt in a bit of a morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. And for the first time in my life, I think drinking's a problem. Now, a blind man can see that, but aren't we the last to see anything in our lives? And what happened in the next couple of moments is a complete stranger sat next to me in the middle of Newark Airport. And after a couple of minutes, this gentleman looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I spit my life story up on a complete stranger, and he said, "I have the answer for you." He asked me a very strange question. He said, "Is it possible for you not to take a drink today?" I was honest with him. I want to drink right now. Pull a piece of paper, address on it. Be in front of this address at 7 o'clock tonight. Try not to drink. 7 o'clock that night, in front of that address, I stood there. Stone cold sober, knees knocking, stomach churning, the mind going a million miles an hour. When a 1979 Chevy Impala pulled up. The stranger was driving a car with a bunch of other strangers, and they said the most spiritual thing you'll ever hear when he pulled up to me. Get in the car. And he brought me to my first meeting, which was my grammar school. And I thought it was bingo. Who knew? It was you guys, But my life in AA started. I like to tell you that I got on a spiritual rocket ship and went up and away, but that's not my story. I don't think that's the story of many of us. I think we grow, we crash, we grow. We talk about these second surrenders, 10 surrenders, 100 surrenders. It's been my life, I fall for the biggest trap in Alcoholics Anonymous all the time. I fall prey to comfortability. I take things for granted. I'm an active member of a group, but I'm dying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He just said it, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle. It comes in my mind. And my mind is filled with a lot of delusions about a lot of things. Number one big delusion, I think abstinence is a solution to a spiritual malady. I think just not drinking, I'm going to get okay. And at 5 years without a drink, I'm not okay. I'm still violent. I'm still fearful. I'm still walking around with secrets. And this gentleman comes into my life. And he takes me through the book at the first time at 5 years without a drink in my body. Active member of a group. And that's when he asked me, this guy, gentleman, Bill Grace, God rest his soul. He asked me a few questions on the spiritual test he was giving me. How long can you hold your breath? How long can you hold your breath, Jimmy? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? And what happened on that day is he cornered me so far, he painted me so far into the corner, not only on my drinking, but on my behaviors, that I had no choice but to take one of those 2 alternatives. Jimmy, the unknown, or keep doing what you're doing. And I was willing to step into the mystery called recovery. And I went through those steps, and I had a spiritual experience, and I like to tell you there were some bumps and bruises along that way. But the truth of the matter is my life started to change. I started to get transformed. And as he sat with me, he would talk about things like staying in the sunlight of the Spirit. Right? How do we do that? Well, Peter gave us that example, the mechanics of that. When these things crop up, not if they're going to crop up, when these things crop up, getting disciplined to that. Now, what I'm going to tell you right now is probably the craziest thing you ever heard, well, one of the craziest things you ever heard. I wanted this thing so badly, and I wanted this life so badly that I took those 2 pages, I photostat them or copied them, whatever you call that, and every day at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I would read those 2 pages and ask myself, or pull my spiritual mirror out and ask myself, where do I stand right now with this stuff? And that might sound a little off the wall, but I wanted to get disciplined. Why? Because I'm an undisciplined guy, and I needed God's help in that. And the only way I knew how to do that was to read those pages and ask myself, where do I stand right now? Am I in the light or am I in the dark? And then it became very easy to cut out the 9 o'clock reading. It became easy to cut out the 6 o'clock reading. And now it's intuitive. It's inside of me. It's in part of my DNA. When disturbed, right? I'm able to go to my phone. I'm able to call him. I'm able to take out a napkin. If I'm in my car, I can write down a simple 4-column inventory. Where do I stand with this stuff? So how do we get to that place? Well, obviously the 12 steps are going to take us to the sunlight of the Spirit, right? Obviously this toolbox of spiritual tools that are put next to your feet are really the key to it all. One of the greatest readings I ever read was out of Daily Reflections. I read it all the time. I think it's just spectacular, the way Bill put these words. If you go to May 1st and you read the second paragraph, it says, "It's the side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light and walk into fear to find peace." And the way the old-timers would say something like that is, the AA is like a big bonfire. A lot of people are walking around the fire, but eventually the fire is going to go out. If you really want to change, if you really want to have a relationship with God, if you really want to walk through the things you need to walk through to get free, you got to walk through the middle of the fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. Now, there's one thing I can't do for anyone in this room. None of you can do it for me. We can't do it for each other, and you guys can't do it for each other. And that's put willingness in your heart. And willingness is an inside job. And what makes us willing? Well, circumstances, being sick and tired of being sick and tired, or as our good friend Ralph likes to say, good whooped ass. How willing am I to do this discipline in order to stay in the light? Because what I found out for me is what a lot of us find out, that this place is not elusive. This place is there for all of us. But all I need to do is to be willing to work through this process of the 12 steps, and to be willing to have a disciplined life when it comes to the things we're going to talk about. Because this whole discussion on growing in understanding and effectiveness, it's really about, it's about me. It's about my relationship with God. But at the end of the day, it's about how useful and how effective I am when I walk out to the store and, and be of service to others. Right? But what I found out, and probably the most important thing I found out, is that God is doing for me what I could never do for myself. That's the key to the door to the sunlight of the Spirit. This isn't about self-help. This is about God's reliance. And there are a lot of walls that I put up on a daily basis to block God out of my life, because I take my sobriety for granted sometimes. Now, that doesn't mean I don't, I don't do what I'm supposed to do. That just means sometimes the miracle of recovery becomes just something in the back of my head. That might sound strange to some of you. But if I was really a guy that was going to any lengths, wouldn't I be writing this stuff out on a daily basis? Wouldn't I be calling my sponsor when disturbed, when these things crop up? Wouldn't I be a guy that would be going to any length to make amends to the people I've harmed with my behavior? Right? And then more importantly, would I really be resolutely turning my thinking mind and going out and helping others? Or do I need to rehash my problem 400 times throughout the day? So 10 becomes a big discipline. 10 becomes a very important discipline, right? I love the effect produced by God. He says it all the time. I love the effect produced by living in the sunlight of the fear. I love the effect produced by freedom, where I'm not in the bondage of Jimmy. Because at the end of the day, all we're talking about is one thing. More God, less Jimmy. More God, less Peter. More God, less you. But how do I accomplish that? So 10 becomes the beginning of it all. I think of this little thing. I picture, we're all familiar with the Olympics, right? And gymnastics. I'm going to talk about gymnastics, right? You ever see that balance beam that these little girls get on top? It's about 20 feet long, piece of wood, probably 4 inches wide, and how they could hold their balance on that? I think that's all of us on a daily basis. Because there's not one person in this room who's not going to face adversity. There's not one person in this room who's going to go through a hard time. There's not one person who's not going to be your turn in the barrel type of thing. We're all going to face death. We're all going to face sickness, health issues. We're all going to face money issues, relationship issues, work issues, problems. Why do we have problems? Well, as Bill Wilson says, because we're problem people. But if I put myself on that beam, can I stay on that beam when the adversities of life hit? Bill talks about in 12 and 12, in the 10th step, the acid test. And the acid test is this. Can I stay sober when the adversities of life hit? Right? When the heavy artillery is coming in, can I stay sober with some of this stuff? And some of you guys I know have gone through a lot of stuff. We've been through a lot of stuff. You stay alive long enough, you'll go through stuff. Right? Can I stay to emotional balance when the heavy artillery is coming in? And then what's he saying, the last one? Can I live to good purpose? And I think that's really where, because of these disciplines of 10, 11, 12, the emotional sobriety that we talk about all the time. You know, we always talk about Bill's little essay in Language of the Heart, you know. This idea of not putting my life putting conditions on you to make me feel better, but really putting my life in the hands of God. Can I sit here today and say to myself, as I go through things in life, because life's going to hit us between the eyes, can I stay on top of that beam no matter what? And I think that's the challenge for me. Probably, maybe it's the challenge for all of us. Right? And that's not to say, you can get through anything easy. Nothing's easy. But I'm given this design for living for a reason. I'm given this design for a living to apply to my life when the going gets tough. And that's the gift. That's the miracle. We'll talk on Sunday about this precious gift that we're all given. Right? The spiritual awakening, the spiritual awareness, this personality change, this psychic change, whatever language you want to, something has happened to everyone in this room as a direct result of God and these 12 steps. Do I keep that in the forefront of my mind? And more importantly, do I go out there and shout this to the newcomer that we have an answer, that we have a solution to your problems? Please join us. Please join us on this path. You know, and so this idea of, understanding and growing, right? An understanding of me, my relationship with myself, my relationship with God, my relationship with my friends, my sponsors, sponsees, strangers in traffic, in the supermarket, and more importantly, how do I bring spiritual principles into my life on a daily basis and bring it out into the world and live this way of life with gratitude? I had an old timer in my neighborhood used to say it all the time. Jimmy, stay small, stay grateful. Stay small and stay grateful. Simplicity, right? And when I stay small, I stay grateful, and allow the abundance of God to work in my life, man, it's incredible what has happened to me, what has happened to you, what's happened to him, all of us. So I'm so grateful for this weekend, and that's all I have. Thank you.